STEM students are less analytical than their counterparts in social sciences and humanities, and I'll present my argument on why. I think this trend can be extrapolated outside of the education sector into other domains too. So, first of all, why is there a correlation, a strong correlation between STEM and STEM adjacent disciplines and the term analytical? So, science, engineering, etc., obviously inherently involves a large volume of quantitative data and analysis. Okay, so it makes sense why the term analytical is heavily correlated with that. And to be honest with you guys, when I earlier on I used to write a lot in my CVs, resumes, applications that I was analytical. Why? Purely based on the merit that I was studying engineering, or I'm an engineer and I did science, engineering, maths, etc. in school. But in hindsight, I wasn't actually analytical. What I was someone who had great attention to detail. Why is that? You have to start from first principles with people in STEM. Their whole life they've spent doing exams, and the success they have within STEM or within STEM fields is primarily a function of how well they can do on an exam. The exam is scoring their ability to produce an answer that matches that in a mark scheme. What's the best example of this? Like, for example, here with one of my students, we were doing a polynomial division. Here, there should be zero remainder. There should be a remainder of zero. Now, within STEM, studying maths, engineering, etc., your focus is on making sure there are no errors here. There is no analysis occurring here. You're just making sure you're writing down the right stuff. If you write the wrong number or the wrong plus or negative sign, you get the answer wrong, you get 0 marks, you don't do well on the exam. This is the mindset you've been inculcated with as someone within STEM. You only ever start to unlearn this mindset from experience as you progress out of the schooling system into higher education. Why is that? Because of this simple trend here. Your past paper exposure is inversely correlated with the amount of time you spend in a specific field. So let's say you want to do engineering. So you do maths, science, physics, chemistry, etc., right? So that's you in school, college. You spend all your time doing past papers. As you move into university, you will still be doing more practice questions. So you're still doing more past papers, but it's declining a bit. Why? Because at university, they should be emphasizing you or encouraging you to do more application work. Okay, lecturers hate past papers. In fact, with us, they only gave us maybe 2 or 3 past papers total. So what happens if you're on the STEM trajectory? You start off here in school, college, doing a ton of past papers because that's how you do well. But what happens as you progress into university and then you progress into doing your master's, a PhD, postgraduate studies? Now it involves theses. There isn't really much past papers left to do, because at this point, no one cares if you got an A plus or A star in a math exam. Right now, we're going into research and development. There is no clear answer. We are exploring, or we are trying to find an answer. That is where analysis becomes more important. Hence why down here I wrote your analytical capabilities are directly proportional to the time you spend in the field. Because as you spend more time in the field, you're reducing your exposure to past papers and past paper mentality. Less focus on just pure attention to detail, more focus on analysis. So let's flesh out this point a bit further on why I believe STEM students are less analytical, why humanities, social science students are more analytical. Basically, because of this, once you get to this point, you drastically reduce your past paper exposure. You're focusing more time on R&D, research and development, exploring, searching for answers, conducting real analysis. Let's take a step back. This is the STEM path. Now, what if you were someone in humanities or social sciences? Now, with those subjects, the mode of examination when you're in school, college is very different. It's focused more on essay writing, and essentially you deploy your analytical skills a lot more with humanities and social sciences, because essentially what in my opinion, being analytical is essentially, I've written it down here, it's an exploratory process we go through to establish whether a hypothesis is true by examining the validity of data, presenting coherent arguments substantiated by that data, both qualitative and quantitative. Essentially, with essays, reports, etc., you have to present your argument on why something is. The analysis that you conduct is essentially you look at various data points, statistics, both quantitative and qualitative in nature. You assess how valid they are and how useful or their utility in supporting your argument. So your analysis of those data points and statistics needs to be thorough in order for it to substantiate the argument you're presenting in your essay, report, etc. Now, with humanities and social science students, most of their examination in their early years is essay writing. There is no clear answer with essay writing. Sure, there are mark schemes that say the essay should include this, X, Y, Z, but it's very different to maths. As I showed you guys with the earlier example, dividing this polynomial by a factor of x minus 2 should only produce a remainder of 0. There is no other answer. That's it. And that's the mindset 99% of students are conditioned with. So for them to undergo an exploratory process to review data, to examine its validity, and then present coherent arguments arguing for or against that data is not really tested. That ability is not really developed at all until they progress through the chain, until they get to university, higher education, where in these settings, you need to use your critical thinking skills a lot more. You need to present arguments for or against a thesis. You're probably going to be working with a professor or a PhD associate or a postdoc whose whole task or whole job is to explore whether something is possible or to analyze effects of one variable on another variable. There is no correct answer. You must analyze thoroughly and with detail. However, for someone to say they are analytical, in my opinion, at this point of the timeline, is not, you could say it's false, unless they've really been doing analytical work outside of their studies. For the most part, I was someone like this too. I claimed I was analytical here. I wasn't analytical. I just had good attention to detail because I had been drilling past paper questions for several years. It wasn't until I got to university, it exposed to me that I wasn't actually analytical, and this is a skill set that I had to develop and cultivate more. So I hope that was understandable. That was my argument on why I believe STEM students are less analytical than their humanities and social science counterparts. And also, just to tie off that point, going back to this graph, the humanities and social science students, they've been doing this from earlier, okay? Their past paper exposure is different. It's more qualitative in nature. There is more marks attributed to analyzing data points and evaluating them. STEM students are not doing that. They are solving mechanics questions, solving statistical questions, writing down skeletal formulae of alcohols and carboxylic acids. It's just a different game. And this is why I believe STEM students are a bit behind the ball in this area, and they need to improve on it if they're young, because you can't just be saying you're analytical if you haven't actually done real analytical work. I suggest these students go intern in a lab, R&D lab. It could be within an educational facility like a university, or it could be for a private company. Do real analytical work and then have to write about that analytical work, or use AI to help you write it, okay? So hopefully that was helpful. I'll be putting out more thoughts and stuff like this.